Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 155 of the IROCKNITTERS podcast. This is your Patreon episode, your extra version that you get at the beginning of the regular episode that goes out to everyone else on YouTube. My name is Cori Eichelberger, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here as a Patreon. I resisted this platform for so long, and now it is just taken such a huge weight off my shoulders, so I finished both the sweaters and got the pattern ready. So now I just have to wait until mid-September for the testers to finish up. This is the Stripe Dream sweater. I think I'll talk more about it when it comes out in September, but I put them on the mannequin because I'm just so happy that they're both done and knit. This is the sweater that I knit 4 different yokes for in June to try to make a yoke that was pleasing but used 4 colors of yarn. It's a collaboration with Leading Men Fiber Arts. I really wanted a gender neutral sweater, something that could be worn by just about anyone. So we have the long sleeved, a little bit shorter version, not super cropped, but a little bit shorter, and then the long sleeved, longer body version. So it does take 4 DK weight skeins. This is their marled yarn. This week's guest is Corrina Ferguson. She is my tech editor. She was an editor of a knitting magazine. She is the third or fourth, depending on how you count it, tech editor that I've had. Have been with Corrina for a couple of years, and she's got a full-time business that she also is doing, secondary business or whatever, and it's just fascinating to me. It's called co-working. And so we talked about tech editing and pattern writing, and as usual, I chatted a lot, I talked a lot. And I've never met Corrina in person because she lives in Florida, so we've only ever done Zoom, and but she is really talented, and I think you'll really like that part of the interview today. She's also a knitwear designer, so we shared a bunch of her patterns. She's written several books. She has 300 patterns on Ravelry, so she's been in the industry a while. And has just been very, very prolific. So I'm hoping that everybody really welcomes her and likes that part of the podcast. It's dark out today, so I do have my lights on bright, so you're going to get a little reflection, but it's just dark. It's very, very hot and humid, but gloomy, so I have my lights on a little brighter today. Plus, I just wanted to show off my sweaters. I could probably turn them down a little bit now. Let's try that. Maybe that'll be a little bit, not quite so spotlighty. We have our next knit night as Patreon groups on September 26th. That's from 8 to 9:30. And then the next October book club date is October 22nd from 7:30 to 8:30. And we did do the book club last time in 5 years, and I think we had 9 people there maybe. So it made for, quite a good discussion. It was one of my favorite books. So I'm leaving on vacation on Saturday. I'm going to Victoria, British Columbia. We have never been. We have been to Toronto and Calgary and the area of Banff. But we went to a dude ranch there. So we drove through Banff and didn't really spend time there, but we were at a dude ranch many years ago. 2 years ago, we went to Seattle. So we're going to Victoria, and I'm going to the Beehive. And I'm hoping that I will hit a couple of yarn stores, and that's what the next podcast will be. I'm hoping to interview a couple of people at the yarn stores there. So we'll see how that works. It'll really depend on how busy they are for the day. So I'm going to be reaching out this week and just letting them know that I'm coming, and we'll see what happens. But otherwise, I'll take video for you. So the Beehive was a mercantile store. It's one of the oldest in Canada, and it is still in existence in a historic building. And if you follow Chantel Knititude on Instagram, she was there this week, and it's her favorite yarn store. Of course, she lives in Canada, but she was there this week on vacation. So she did a little Instagram story with some video, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to go. They also sell the Cowichan sweaters there, and she was also sharing the big, heavy, thick yarn jackets, almost big sweaters with the animals on them. I know they make them in vests, and so that might be kind of fun to purchase. I don't know that I want to walk around with an animal logo, but maybe they'll have something more decorative. I know they won't have anything in color because they're all done in cream and dark gray or brown, but we'll see what we find. I'm really excited to get away and just have some time, and because these are off the needles and the Chevy hat is off the needles, well, that'll get me into the next thing. My next design that I'm working on is going to be called a Stevie hat. I'm naming it for Kylie's boyfriend, fiance, soon to be husband, partner in life, and he always has a hat on. He does shave his head now, and so he always wears a hat, and I always knit him a hat for Christmas. So I designed a hat that just has a simple cable right up the front. Just one cable, very simple, in a lighter weight yarn, because I usually knit his in like worsted or Aran, and so this time I'm going to go for a sport, and I'm waiting to hear back from Mayak. I asked Mayak for yarn support, so we'll see. I was nervous to do it, so I didn't do it for a while, and then I thought, what? Everyone else has said yes, you should just ask. So I have a cowl to do for Cascade, and that's going to just be a simple advanced beginner, adventurous beginner cowl with some brioche striping in it. I have yarn from Cascade for that, and I'm going to be knitting on that this week. And then hopefully, I've already knit the Stevie hat up. I just need yarn. I just knit it with scrap yarn. I don't even know what it was. It was just heavier than fingering. I just wanted to see how it worked. So I need a yarn, and I could use some sport from my stash if they say no. We'll see. But I will need test knitters for both those things, the cowl and the Stevie hat. The cowl is called a Little Ditty, and so if you're interested in either one of those, let me know. If you're on my test knitter list already, I have a huge list of test knitters. You will get a call in the next week or so, because those will both come out in October, probably beginning of October or so, hopefully before I go to Rhinebeck, because I would love to have that done. So I saw a video. I've been watching some of the Nitty Natty journey around the United States. If you don't already follow Nitty Natty, that's Natalie. She is on a tour of the US with her husband in a van, and they both took off from their full-time jobs, and she's been doing her yarn business for a while. She has Sock Week and all these things, but they're on a quest to visit all 50 states, and they stop at a yarn store in every state. So you can go back and watch. They have 30 states done, I think. Anyway, and so they came to Minnesota, and I don't think they came to Minneapolis, which is shocking to me because we have 14 yarn stores. But they came to Warm and Woolly, which is north. It's a brand new shop north of the Twin Cities. It was probably easier on their route maybe to go there. I don't know. But I had offered to tell her about some of the yarn stores so she could, but I didn't hear from her. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So she did a tour of Warm and Woolly, and she interviewed the new shop owner, and I have not been up to that shop yet. It's probably, an hour north of me. It would be considered outside of the general suburban area of Minneapolis and St. Paul. But they were going through the shop, and you know how they do, they show yarns and all different things, and then you think to yourself, I need to have that right now. I need to have that. So I got on her website, and I was like, oh, bummer, they're not here. And I couldn't find them. And then I did. And look at what I found. Look at what I got. I got a wood orange yarn bowl. Is it not beautiful? I cannot wait to set it next to my chair. I put it in here so that I wouldn't forget. So this comes from Past Times Farm. And it's a man who's local to her, and she has a bunch of these. I just needed the orange one. It is a piece of art. It is so pretty. So I'll be upfront. It cost me, I think, $75, something like that. And I would assume that she's making half of that. I mean, that's normal markup for a retail store, is to buy yarn for half and sell it, for twice or whatever. So I would assume that she made $35 and he made $35. And so in that regard, I'm like, it should have been more maybe, right? Like this is a lot of work and it's so beautiful. I'm so excited about it. So I still haven't been to her shop because I didn't have time to run up there. And in the moment I was like, what if someone buys that orange? That orange bowl. So you can go on her website, but I highly recommend watching the video and seeing the interview with her, because it's a lovely shop. A shop closed and then she opened in a new location. So I think she got some of their yarn and kept like some of their customers and stuff. But she went into a mall, a defunct mall. And so I think there's a lot of space. She has just a ton of space. She's a big knitting area. She has knit nights and they stay until midnight on Friday nights. And yeah, so it just sounded lovely. I cast on the other day something that I purchased that had come in the mail, and I was sitting and I needed to try this on to decide how long the sleeves needed to be. I was at the bottom, on the bottom end of the thing, and I didn't want to get up, and I was in my pajamas, and this bag that had come in the mail was sitting there, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna cast that on. So this is my Bling bag by Laura Nelkin. I'm at the top, but I'll tell you why. But here is the bottom. You start down here, and I ordered the yarn from Kremke, and it's a recycled denim. So Laura sells kits for these, and you get the beads with it. But she used seed beads, and you know me, the more color the better. And her seed beads blended beautifully, but I wanted the pop of color, and I already had these beads from my Spring Fever Day shawl. So I just got online and ordered the Kremke yarn, Kremke. I'll put it down here. It's Soul wool. It's hard to get. I had to buy it from Europe, but of course I saw the orange and I was like, but if you go to Laura's website, she has all different color in kits, I think. And so I started putting these beads on, and I'm going to use this for my bead class as an example, because you just do this zigzag and then you offset these. And now at the top, you do a folded edge and you insert an I-cord drawstring, and she has a video on that. And so I started watching the video, and the video is all the tips and tricks for this whole bag, because when she does her beads, she only strings the beads on one of the strands. So this is fingering weight. So you could use your own fingering weight yarn you have at home, but I thought that this recycled denim, which is really like working with cotton or string, right, would be a lot more substantial and not quite so drapey like a merino or something. But she only put the bead on one because she's using seed beads, whereas my beads, which are 6.0, that I got on Amazon in a box full, which I've already talked about because I used these beads for that Spring Fever Day, and I have 20 colors and a little compartment of each of the colors. So I did not pre-string my beads. I put them on my super floss and I did it that way. So I put my beads over the whole strand. So that worked for me. But I just have to put on this folded edge. I think it's 6 rows, and then put my drawstring through. But apparently she uses a one of those try-it-on tubing cords, and you make your slot around that. I was like, oh, that's a new technique, so I better do it that way. Like, that would sound, but isn't it cute? Like, I mean, I think it's just going to be the perfect little, I'm hoping that I will cast something on for my trip that I can carry in that all over when I go on my little vacation. I just think it's so cute. So, so cute. Bling bag by Laura Nelkin. And she sells lots of kits. If you want to try beading, she does beaded necklaces, beaded bracelets, and they're all knit and some crocheted. The bottom of this bag can be crocheted if you want it to be more sturdy. I find this to be super taut and super tight, but it does sag a little down, and I'm okay with that. But it does sit up too. It sits really flat. It's got a lot of support. Oh, it's just so cute. And it's only taken me a couple nights to do it. But if you have never used the super floss method, that is not the method she used. And I really prefer that method. What have I been watching? I am still watching Vanwives every Sunday. I love their energy. I love their youthfulness. I love their just sheer determination to turn their homestead into a lovely working place for them to live and grow their own food and all of that. So Vanwives and Cole the Cornstar. I was telling Ross last night, we went out to dinner. I was telling Ross how I learned all about soybeans. He has been rebuilding this old mansion that was his great-grandfather's and cleaning up the farm and doing all of that. But then on the side, he also does educational videos about farming and what it takes to be a farmer. And he's 27 years old, and he talks about the finances and borrowing money from the bank and renting land and equipment costs and all of that. And this time he had this hour-long video, and I thought, do I want to learn about corn and soybeans, you know, and how the farm, I watched the whole thing. And I said to Ross, I know what a soybean is now, and I know how they grow, and I know what they need, and how you can have a 2-pod, a 3-pod, or a 4-pod. And yeah, he just does. He's just so eager and enthusiastic, and that's kind of how I feel I am sometimes. That people get a little like, you know, too much, but I just love him. I just think he's, yeah, really doing a nice job trying to educate the public. So Ross is like, you didn't know what soybeans look like? Like you grew up in South Dakota, Minnesota? I'm like, no. If I'd have looked out in a field, I now would know. I would absolutely know what it looks like. But before that, you know, we grow a lot of crops here. So like sugar beets, and I said, I could have been a potatoes out there. The leaves, the height, it all looked the same to me. Yeah. And then he went into the rows and he pulled corn off to get an average for their yield. And he went in and then picked one. Then he went down 7 and up 3 and picked one, and then over 11 and picked one. And he's in this cornfield practically getting lost. And then he brings them out, and then he shows you how they count the kernels around and up, and then they average them out. I was like, really? I mean, I've been eating sweet corn my whole life. I grew up. I know knee high by the 4th of July. I didn't know anything else. So then I've been watching Alone season 11, which is lovely, but I hate that it comes out once a time on Thursday nights and I have to wait for it. I watched Emily in Paris the other night. The first half of the season came out. Why are they doing that now? Why are they not just giving us the whole thing so we can watch it just straight through? So now we have to wait till September something for the second half. But the costuming is amazing. It's amazing. The cloak she wears, if you guys have watched it or if you haven't watched it yet, wait. The cloak she wears to the masquerade ball. Oh my gosh. And then I'm watching Alone Australia. That also comes out. I don't know what's going on though. The last 3 episodes have not been available to me on the History Channel. So I don't know if they restricted it or if it's going to come out later. But I keep trying to watch 8, 9, 10, 11 or something. And it keeps saying not available for TV. And I was like, what's going on? Give me my Alone. And then Vikings started preseason football. So I have been watching that. And they don't play any of the main players. And so I don't know all of them. But for the Vikings, the last 3 games, they have had one of the players that's on the sidelines, one of the best players, Justin Jefferson. And then they had Harrison Smith. And then this time they had the coach during the 3rd quarter, and they talk during the whole thing to the announcers. That has been eye-opening, especially the coach talking. The ref came over and talked to him, and he talked to the ref, and he was mic'd the whole time. It was really good. I thought, boy, that somebody should get a raise, because that was brilliant. Because the preseason is kind of, you know, the rookies are all trying to make it, and I want them to all make the team. You know, there's these young guys. The one guy, they listed off all the teams he'd been on. He'd played in a bunch of games, and he'd been on like 9 teams already, and no one still had picked him up. I'm like, somebody take him. So anyway, Okay, enough of that. Some things I saw on the internet. I want to share the Amu hat by Olga Baraya Kefelian. It's a reversible ribbed regular hat, but the reason that it caught my eye was that the crown decreases are so cool. And I'll put a picture in because they're just really neat. And so this came out in August, so it is brand new. And so I think I probably saw it on Instagram, and the hat just looks great. So I thought, gosh, I got to share that with some people who might not have seen it. And then I was sent the article on this grieving and weaving group. It was on npr.org. It is a little video of a group that meets with people who are grieving, and they craft together and they share their community time, and it is lovely. So I will put the link in the show notes if you haven't seen it. It was on Instagram. Someone posted a link. I have not reposted a link yet on Instagram, but I could certainly do that as well. But yeah, it's they meet at the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. And so they literally meet at the cemetery. And it's just this lovely group of people who are all crafting in different ways and talking about how that has helped them through the grief process. It's really, really good. And then I saw this awesome pencil scarf. You guys are, yeah, you're not going to believe this. It's by Susie Ashworth. It came out in March of 23, so it's not too old. It uses fingering weight yarn, and it is so cute. It would make the best teacher gift, or if you're a teacher or you teach something, it's colored pencils all the way down this scarf. It is so cute. I mean, it's just brilliant. What a great idea. I don't know what the back of it looks like, so that would be interesting. There are only 2 projects on Ravelry, so no matter what, we all need to go out and give it some love, right? Come on. If someone designs a pattern that's that good and only 2 people ever make it, somebody else needs to make it. Or we at least need to buy it just to give her the boost that says, this is a really cute idea. I forgot to include the video I took. I always forget when I'm editing because it's on my phone, but I don't have it in my show notes. So this time in big red letters, I put Cori, include video you forgot. Right in the top because I totally forgot to put it in. So this time I'm going to try to remember. But my Cori stories this time is I got an email message from the pastor at my church, Pastor Peter. And my husband has on a bunch of church committees because he works for Portico Benefit Services, the ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Churches of America, and does their pensions and their benefits. So he has been asked to be on some committees, and he has enjoyed that process. He has a good head for finances and that kind of thing. But he's also on the Minneapolis Synod because someone at our church volunteered him for that. And then he got asked to be on the call committee. Our senior pastor left, and our second pastor, Peter, was applying for the head pastor position. And so Ross is on the call committee to do all this. So when I get this email, it is not out of the question that I might get an email from Pastor Peter. He's also going to marry my daughter. So, so I get this email and it said, hey, Cori, I need a favor. Do you have time to help me out? And I was like, sure. What do you need? And he said, well, I want to thank some people at the church. So would you have time to go get some gift cards at Target? And I was like, yeah, I can get gift cards, right? Like, no problem. He's like, well, if you could get 5, so this went back and forth a few times. If you could go get 5 $100 gift cards and then open them and scratch off the back and take a picture and send it to me, that would be great. And I'm driving, so I should not be reading these emails, but I was in a ton of traffic. So I'd get to a stoplight and I'd read the next one and I'd be like, well, I'm going right by Target. Why don't I just stop and pick these up? I can drop them off at the church. Why would I take pictures? And then I'm like, why can't I just buy them online? I could just give him the numbers online. Like, okay. But then I thought, well, maybe and everyone's been helping him out with this whole process, right? And our pastor's been gone, and in my head, I'm in traffic and I'm not thinking, I'm not paying attention. And I just come home and I come in the back door and I said to Ross, God, I got the weirdest message from Pastor Peter. And then it dawns on me, right? And Ross is like, I said, he wants me to buy 5 $100 gift cards and I think it's a scam. And Ross is like, it's totally a scam, Cori. And I was like, oh my lands. Like I was all in for like 4 or 5 emails. So then I emailed the guy and I said, well, I don't know how to scratch him off the back because I am gonna, you just took brain power from me, dude, whoever you are or woman. And they're like, oh, it's no problem. You just take a picture, make sure you scratch them off clearly. And then I sent a thing with big letters, scam. And then I got an email back that said, are you still there? And I was like, hell no, I'm not still there. So this is what I think happens. Pastor Peter is on the website. So his email is on the church website. That's not what it came from when I went and looked. It came from Peter with a bunch of numbers behind it. And then my email is on my website. And so that's how they try to find you, right? How they would have known that I was a member of St. Andrew other than maybe watching the podcast. But like, I don't think I say the church name that much, whatever. So I almost bought $500 worth of gift cards. Like I might just have stopped and then picked them up on my way home. I was going right by. Here is your, do not look at your phone when you're driving. Do not look at your phone when you're in your car. You're not thinking. You're not paying attention. I would never look at my phone while I was moving. But you know, I was sitting, I don't know what happened, but we were like literally sitting there, not going anywhere. I know that some people pick up their knitting at a stoplight. I don't do that. But I looked at the email from the pastor because I felt like it was important. Ross is like, Cori. I'm like, I figured it out. As soon as I got home, I opened it up. You know, I opened it up and looked and his name wasn't even right. So then I called him and left a message and just said, you don't have to get back to me, but I just want you to know that there are parishioners in our church who would totally do that. Like in a moment they would think. And they said something like, you'll be reimbursed, da da da, you know. Oh, so yeah. Anyway, audiobooks. Oh, I read the cutest little audiobook and it was sent to me by a viewer and it happened to be in my queue on Libby in the moment. Like I had just gotten it on hold. It's called Sipsworth by Simon Van Boy. I don't know if I should tell you what it's about. It's so good. Okay. You know, I think this is starting to become a kind of a popular topic, but you know a book called A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Bachman, you know, grouchy, crotchety old man, they tell his story, right? I've read the one about the guy who just left his house and started walking. Anyway, that is kind of what this is. This is an old woman who is living alone, very lonely. Her house is not, you know, she's not taking care of things very much, and you just feel really sorry for her. You kind of feel like she's in that state of, you know, depression, I don't want to live anymore, and you're not sure, but she's funny. There's some funny parts. So she has something come to her door that she starts to take care of, and then it tells the story of what happens to her and how she doesn't leave her house and she hasn't had any friends, but she has a real regular system. Like she goes to the store 1 day a week, but to get what she needs. And yeah, it was really good, really cute. I don't know that there's much to talk about, like controversially or like in a book club, like themes or anything like that, but man, was it good. It was just a great story and surprising. Like, oh my gosh, you're just so surprised when you find out. I can't give it away. Yeah. So Sipsworth, very short, 5 hours. so on audio, so real short. Then I read James by Percival Everett, and that is an 8-hour audiobook. This is going to be a movie by Steven Spielberg, apparently. And it is the story of Huckleberry Finn told from Jim's point of view, the slave. And I wasn't really sure. I taught Huckleberry Finn. I do not have a fondness for Huckleberry Finn. After you teach something for a number of years and kids don't like it, they don't want to read it, they're not. Oh. So I just have a bit of... So I wasn't really sure, but, and it's sad, you know, like the way the slaves were treated and what he goes through. Then, you know, they think he killed Huck, if you know the story of Huckleberry Finn. And then they go down the river. So, it will be a phenomenal film. But it was good. It was good. I just can't love on it because of my past experience with being a high school teacher. And junior high, middle school. So then I read Fight Night, and this is a story of 3 generations of women, grandma, mother, daughter. The daughter is young, 12 maybe. Grandma grew up in a really religious upbringing, and so did the author of this novel. She's Canadian, and so she has some history in that. The mother is unmarried and pregnant with her 2nd child, 3rd trimester, and is just going through stuff, lots of stuff. And for me, I thought this was going to be about a fight night, like about fighting, and I kept waiting, and it isn't about that. Sometimes I should read what it's about first. Cramped together in their Toronto home on the precipice of an extraordinary change, Grandma and Swiv undertake a vital new project, setting out to explain their lives in letters they will never send. Alternating between the exuberant, precocious voice of young Swiv and her irrepressible, tenacious grandma, Fight Night is a love letter to mothers and grandmas and to all the women who are still fighting, painfully, ferociously, for a way to live on their own terms. I really believe that, you know, this is epistolary, so it's letters. So and then they give each other assignments to write the letters, what they need to write next. And so I think it might have been better off read than listened to, because they're talking and then they assign and then they read the letters. It was good, but not my favorite. And it was 6 hours in length. So I learned some things and it was interesting. The letters part threw me, and I was expecting something else, and I hate that when I'm off kilter. So I shouldn't be able to give it a poor review because my experience with it was not what it should have been. It just wasn't what I thought the story was going to be about at all. Then I read Stray by Stephanie Danler, and following the stuff that I had just read, everything was a narration by main character. And then this is too, and this woman has a really hard life and things aren't going well for her, and it's a memoir. And I shouldn't have read it in a row with other things that were like that, because this just felt like another story of someone's hard life, which is, we often have hard lives. It's a memoir of growing up in a family shattered by lies and addiction, and of one woman's attempts to find a life beyond the limits of her past. And her mother and father are really dysfunctional, and she's a grown woman now, you know, so she can start making better choices. But you know how when you have that kind of trauma in your past, your choices are all not always. And there were some really good lines in this book, some things that I often listen when I'm driving and then when I'm walking, so I can't always write them down and take notes. But one of the things they talked about in this book was having desert eyes, about the people who live in the desert and can see the beauty of the desert, but people who don't live in the desert can't always see the beauty. And that's kind of how I feel about Arizona when we go. I'm just like, it is so stark and so deserty in comparison to the greenery that I grew up with. And the way they were explaining it, and I was like, oh, I just don't have desert eyes yet, right? Like I mean, I can see the beauty in the mountains surrounding Scottsdale and stuff, but it is just so dry and, you know, so different. And then there are people who are like, I just love the desert beauty. And I always think it's not green, right? And so this description of having these desert eyes and being able to appreciate it was really good. So there were several parts in this book that I could have written some lines down from. It just overall was just another tragic story of someone's life. And I had James, Fight Night, and Stray all in a row. And they were all kind of that, oh, heavy, you know, this is hard. So in separated, they were all really good, but together they were too much. Then I finished Starfish, which is by Lisa Phipps, and it's funny and sad, but funny. This is the story of a young girl who is obese and her life and how she is treated by people in the world and how she is bullied. And boy, does she go through it. But she's funny, and she's a comedian, and so she makes fun of a lot of things, and that keeps it easy to read, definitely. This is a YA book. It's only 3 hours long, and she makes herself into a starfish to take up more space when she's in the swimming pool. And everyone calls her Splash because on her 5th birthday, she jumped in the swimming pool and made a huge splash. And since then, she has been treated terribly, especially by her mother. And so if you have any child in your life, or adult actually, who's overweight or obese, and you would just like a little insight into how you could treat them and how the things that are said to them can be seen, are hurtful, and it highly recommend. Just every teacher in the world should read this book. It was just so eye-opening. Yeah. I mean, we all have been bullied, I think. I don't think that there's anyone who goes through school and says, oh, I never had anybody bother me, right? Like, in elementary school, my lips were bigger than my face. And because my last name was Schmidt, I had very plump lips, which I don't have anymore, right? You grow into some of your body parts, right? But back in the day, there was a beer called Schmidt Big Mouth. It wasn't spelled the same, but I got called that a lot. And in junior high, in homeroom, there were 2 girls that were so mean to me all the time. And I was in all the things, right? And so I probably thought I was all that. I was a cheerleader, and I ran track, and I did gymnastics, and I played volleyball, and I was a teacher's aide. And, you know, I probably, and they weren't, but they were, I can still remember both their names. And there are times in my life when I have thought I would like to look up on Facebook and see if they're out there and see if they turned into kind human beings, because they really hurt me, right? And I think we've all had that. I would not say that I had a terrible life experience, but boy, reading this book, I'm like, brings it right back. Bully, 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 right? And I think there were times in junior high that I probably laughed at kids, you know, in the lunchroom or whatever. I just think, oh, right? I probably sat with a group of girls and we probably pointed at what someone was wearing or what their hair looked like or whatever, or if they were poor, or like in this, that happens too. So enough of that, but it really, The giveaway, let's do the giveaway and we'll be done. So last week I talked about this yarn that I got when I was in Philadelphia teaching. It is Biscot, Bis Sock. It is 85 merino, 15 nylon. The skein of yarn for next time is going to be the comments down below the Patreon podcast or on YouTube. I combine them. so that I just draw from random number generator. And I think you should tell me what you would knit with this bisque sock. Would you knit socks, a shawl, a hat, fingerless mitts? What would you knit with the bisque sock? Asked you to chime in on what you would knit of Mary Lou Egan's. And I drew, and that random number generator picked 1. It never picks 1, right? You never want to be the first commenter. It picked 1, and that was Bonnie, and that's my friend Bonnie. And I think I'd be okay saying this, that Bonnie recently broke her leg, and she's laid up, and she's my friend that I'm going to Rhinebeck with. And yeah, and so she doesn't have to have surgery, so she should still be able to go to Rhinebeck. But when I looked at the names, I was like, oh, Bonnie won the book, so hopefully this will bring her some joy, because she's laid up, no weight bearing for 4 or 5 weeks. Yeah, she broke her femur. So send up good thoughts for her. She's been on the podcast. She lives across the city from me, so I don't get to see her that much, but I did Zoom with her, and I have done some Marco Polo back and forth with her the last few days, because I know she's just sitting there in the chair knitting, and I know what that's like when you have to sit in the chair for a long time and recover from things. So yes, I was tickled that the Drop Dead Easy Knits book is going out to Bonnie. Okay, I have some teaching coming up in September and October. If you know of a local yarn store or of an event that is looking for teachers, please have them include me, especially if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I really want to teach at DFW. I taught for their guild, and I did an okay job, so I want them to choose me. Yeah, okay, that's all I've got. Love you all. See you in 2 weeks. Bye. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the I Rock Knits podcast, Chatting with Corrina. This is Corrina Ferguson. She is my tech editor, also a knitwear designer, and a co-working business owner. Right? I guess you, yeah, host. So we have lots to talk about today. Corrina's coming to us from Florida. And I have never met Corrina in person. We have only ever done Zooms. And then she gets a lot of emails from me. So I would say that you are a pro in the industry. Like, you have been doing knitwear design and tech editing for a number of years, and you have a real skill set around that. So tell us a little bit about, like, when you started knitting, how you learned to knit, the early days.
So I actually haven't been knitting that long in the scheme of things. We moved to Florida about 20 years ago, and it was my first opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom. And my boys had the audacity to go to school. And so I was at home, and I babysat my nephew a bit, and I was like, I need something. And there was a yarn store that was literally within walking distance of the first place that we lived here. And so I picked up knitting, and then I really just took to it. And then I started, teaching some classes at the yarn store, and then I started designing my own things, and it just kind of snowballed. And knitting was just that absolutely perfect raising 2 boys kind of career, because as a knitting designer, I would just sit at Boy Scouts, at football practices, at lacrosse, all of different things. And I would have my knitting with me. I remember there was one little boy in a family, and he would come and he would talk to me, and he'd go, Miss Corrina, you're not looking. How do you do this without looking? Because, I'd be like watching, the practice or whatever. And so it was just very perfect to fit into the little nooks and crannies of our life. And then as the boys got older and more independent, I was able to do more things. When they were in high school, I had already written a couple of books, and I was a magazine editor for a while, for a knitting magazine. And it just kind of snowballed. And most of my best friends are knitters. All the people that I met here in Florida, it was either through the boys' school and church, or it was through, the people that I met knitting. So it just kind
Did
of,
you have any training to be an editor?
I
Like,
did. I didn't take training to be an editor, actually. I am very math inclined. I
I
actually,
know
I
from the
actually,
English teacher.
yes. Well, I wanted to be a math teacher, actually. And when the boys, that was one of the things that I pursued a little bit while the boys were younger, is I started going back to school to get my degree to be a math teacher. But that's like a whole nother story why I didn't do that. But I'm very math inclined, and I started working with designers that I was, working within the industry. And there was a lady that used to own a pattern distribution company. And so I would edit her stuff. And that was kind of my first experiences with it. And then I was like, oh, I kind of really like this. And I love designing, but there are a lot of times that I like editing more than designing because I love being able to find out what's wrong and fix it, and the numbers, and I have so many spreadsheets in my life. It's
Yeah,
just
I just
insane.
wondered how you got into the magazine editor thing, because that
And yeah, that was well, first off, it was definitely a lot of credit goes to networking because I had people in the industry who knew that the job was available. One of them actually was considered for the job and she wasn't interested. And she's like, "Well, what about Corrina?" And I actually my other background before we moved here, I worked in the publishing industry. I worked
okay,
for a newspaper.
okay,
And so and I worked in advertising and IT in different departments, but I had a very good grasp on, the structures of
sure,
deadlines and all of that. So
sure. And what was the magazine?
it was creative knitting. It was a magazine that was published out of a small company in Indiana for years and years, and they still have, I think, one crochet publication that they still do. But I had done it for a couple of years, and that was really when, printed magazines were doing, and we've seen all of them kind of go away. So,
Yep, yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So, you was your first pattern the book that you wrote, the Warm
No,
Days?
no, no,
Oh, okay. I
no.
was looking, I was online looking at your patterns, and you have 300 patterns on Ravelry,
I have a lot.
folks. So there's a ton out there to look at. And I was just scrolling back, and because there were so many, I couldn't figure out when you actually started. And the very like number 300 on the list was the book. What is it called? Warm
Warm
Days.
Days, Cool Knits.
Yes, yes.
And that's the book I
So
wrote with lighter weight yarns, kind of geared towards people living in Florida, where why did I wait? I lived in Ohio all my life, and then I moved to Florida and started knitting. So make that make sense. Yes.
so there. I did take a picture of it because I was like, oh, and that was like in 2015-ish.
Yes. 2015, I think the first one was published. My first patterns were published on Ravelry. I want to say 2008
Okay.
is when
Oh,
I started publishing.
when it first
Yeah.
started. Okay.
I was
Yeah, I was scrolling, but I wasn't clicking on everyone to see which one was first.
there-
You've been designing for a long time. So
yes.
what initially made you decide, okay, I want to design? Was it the yarn store experience? You were helping people with patterns
It
and
was
you kind of
definitely it was definitely the yarn store experience. Actually, the way that it kind of happened for initially wanting to design was I was teaching classes and we were using other people's patterns. And the yarn store that I worked at the time was doing it the correct way. But when I first learned how to knit, the knitting instructor that I had at one of the big box stores, she actually gave us photocopied pages out of somebody else's book. And I didn't realize at the time that that was not okay. Like I assumed she wrote the book, or, that she had,
yeah,
she just
yeah.
photocopied some,
But I
but
also don't think that back in the day
it wasn't as
any
big of a
we
deal.
were no one was aware. Like we weren't protecting copyright. We
So, but as I
people
was
were just
no, yeah, it wasn't
willy-nilly.
as big of a deal.
It should have been a deal, but we weren't making a deal,
No.
I think.
So
Yeah.
when I was teaching classes, I realized that I had more control over what I was teaching them if I wrote the pattern myself.
Got it.
And so that I think the patterns, I don't think I ever published them. The first things that I wrote up were dishcloths because that was during the height of what are they called now? Modern daily knitting.
Yep.
When they did the
Yep.
dishcloth clubs and everybody
Yep.
was getting and so I wrote up a bunch of dishcloths and we did a dishcloth club at the thing and we had little lessons on it. And so that's kind of how it got started. But I realized that if I had my own patterns, then I could distribute them like I wanted to. I could teach what I wanted to. I could include the bits and pieces that I thought would be interesting for people to learn. So
You have a huge variety of patterns, though. You've knit and designed all the things, like a lot of the things. But sweaters is a big one for you. You like.
I've done a lot of sweaters, but most of my sweaters have been for publications.
Okay, yeah, because this is the one I knit. Your Morganite.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Because
I loved working with them. That was a nice.
I hadn't ever knit one of yours, and I have been working with you now for a while, and I was like, I really should support her by her pattern, knit
Thank
something. So yeah, I guess I was aware of how much you had knit, but this morning when I was looking, I was like, wow, like there's like 16 pages of designs or 12 pages of designs on Ravelry. I mean, it goes way back, and
it's a lot.
And a lot of your designs are still really relevant.
I think a lot of them are. One of the things that I find, though, from my sweaters in particular, is that when I was designing sweaters for publications a lot in the past, they wanted everything very fitted, very feminine, and I'm not designing sweaters that way anymore. Like I have 2 sweaters planned right now, and neither of them have anything close to negative ease. They're made to be comfortable and loose and light. And
yeah, I can see that. But certainly with those more fitted sweaters, you could just upsize.
Yes.
If you wanted a different fit, you could, and some, not all would do that, but some things would just upsize as well in a bigger size and be more loose, because you've got and you do, I think I read in one of your interviews that you like to do lace. Like lace is
I love lace.
Yeah. And see, I don't mind lace, but I don't design in lace. And one of the other things that you said, that you love a good advanced beginner. And I think that's when I hit it off with you too, is when we were interviewing each other to get started. I had said that I had 2 different tech editors and had a lot of issues with my patterns going out into the world with small errors in them or things not being caught. And it's partly, and I think I was very upfront about the fact, is that I am not trained in pattern writing and numbers are not my thing. And I don't do Excel well. I don't do Excel hardly at all for my patterns. So I do it all on paper. So I'll have 30 sheets of paper out in front of me with the numbers and the increases and the sizes. And I am like, it's old school. And I wish that I would have learned, program or better math. And so I just really struggled with the tech editors that I was working with, because I really needed a little more hand holding. I needed a little more investment from my tech editor. And I was willing to pay for that. But you didn't shy away. You weren't like, ooh, okay. Like,
no.
Where's she coming from? Because I had designed quite a few things, but I always have to work really hard through, because I'm an English teacher, but also because I am a verbal volcano. I am just a chatty Cathy, and things and so my patterns tend to be wordy and long and have lots of notes, and that's just the way I think. And that's not always the way knitter wants your stuff. But because I was teaching beginners, and it went over into advanced beginners wanting things that I could design for them. And so then my most popular pattern became this little, cowl that was just basically a sampler for them that had some stitch patterns in it. And I called it the Knitting at the Library cowl. Who knew that thousands of knitters across the country knit at the library? And so they saw the title and they, and it's supposed to look like books on the shelf. And I've shown it on the podcast, but it was those advanced beginner patterns that kind of launched me into, I know that they can't figure out where they're at in the pattern if they come out a few days back, a few weeks or days later. They don't know where, like, checklist patterns became the thing that I sold, because people would say, I love that you write out every row. I have other more advanced knitters that would be like, oh my God, just tell me what to do, right? Like, so you were all in on that. And you also do all of my graphic layout for me. I just want everybody to know, because I've talked about you, like I send it to my tech editor and she's doing my layout right now, but it's nice to put a face with a picture. And I do pay Corrina for an hourly wage, and it costs me more to have her do more of the work, but I'm not as capable of seeing what needs to be done. And because of her editing experience, also with magazines where you have to like hone down, my things come back pretty marked up, which is great, because I'm like, accept, because I look at it and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a much better way. And it has made me a better pattern writer. It's made me a little better at doing some of it, but I still struggle a little bit. So when you started tech editing, were you tech editing mostly for friends at first? Like, or because you would have known designers in the industry, right?
Yeah, I had a good number of people that I knew in the industry. And so I started out tech editing for people that I knew personally. Like, there used to be trade shows and we would all go in person and get to know each other and, all of that. And then it kind of expanded to, and I think it's a lot in the knitting world. It's very much, who do you know kind of a thing. And I don't mean that to sound like an old boys club, but it's kind of like, oh, do you want to do edits for this company? They're sending me a bunch of edits, but I'm writing a book in October. Can I put your name in? And so it definitely was very word of mouth. And it's one of those things. Right now I'm in a little bit of a lull because a lot of designers had tons and tons of patterns over the summer. There were days when I looked at my board and I had like 30 things in process. But
so we all do, because fall is publication time, right? We're all like, the yarn companies want their stuff in September, October, right?
Yep.
So you were swamped.
So I was swamped. But the thing is I think I have an ad that runs on Ravelry that costs me about $1 a month, but I don't advertise. People come and, and it was interesting. I think you're one of the few people that you sat and we talked before we did it, which I probably should do more, because it would save me from having to fire clients. And I don't like to fire clients, but sometimes, it's not going to work out the way that they want to do things. And that's one of the things that I love about working with you, is the fact that you're teachable. And the fact that you look and you're like, oh, and there are times that I say, well, if we do it this way, and you're like, no, my people like it that way. And that is good. And it's great to know your people. But there's some people where you say, you need a little shaping here. And they're like, well, I don't want to, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, then I'm going to see their boobies, because there's nothing there to cover that, and it's like, and it's just fascinating to me how many people will come and want to pay you and then completely ignore your advice. And it's like, okay. So I've made a habit of keeping patterns. And so that way, if someone comes back and says, well, this doesn't work. And I'm like, well, yeah, I told you that wasn't going to work. So we can revisit it and we can fix it. But that's part of why I love working with you, is because we go back and forth and we figure out what's going to work, but you're also open to suggestions.
Oh, I think I was pretty upfront about that from the beginning, right? Yeah. Is that I had this dream for so many years to do this, because I love my 3-ring notebook that is so full of ideas, right? Like I have been collecting for years, and I said it for a long time. I want to be a knitwear designer. And I was trained as a teacher. So I was teaching. I had been teaching since I lived in Virginia in 2001 to 2006. Felting. It was the height of the felting craze. And I traveled to the, Charlottesville and Williamsburg and Richmond because it was all felting. And I loved teaching, but I also wanted to put my ideas down on paper and didn't feel like I had a skill set around that. And I think that's why I went through several tech editors, because I didn't have a fit. And I wasn't upfront about the fact that this wasn't just going to be always just checking my numbers, just going through and checking my numbers, and that I was very experienced in writing the pattern, and it would all be very, that I knew it wouldn't. And so I had gotten better at that, but we do a lot of back and forth, a lot.
Oh, and I think that's the way that it needs to be, because tech editing is definitely a relationship. It's not I send it back. I mean, there's certain things you'll get, like somebody will send, you send me a hat and I'm like, okay, this looks good. We need to make this a little longer, and it's done.
Yeah.
But anything more complex, there's going to be back and forth and discussions. And, but yeah, I like working with people that, and I want to have a dialogue where you're like, there's one lady that I work with that I was like, hey, our sleeve cap isn't going to work on this. And she was like, no, actually, if you check this book, this, and this. And I'm like, well, if you're telling me to check her book, then I'm wrong. So I learned something new this past month. Did you know that when you're doing color work, that the color work stitches get taller? Like the gauge might be 1824. So that's a normal gauge, 18 stitches in 24 rows. You put that in color work and it might be 18 stitches in 20 rows, because the stitches get taller because of the floats. I did not know that. I don't know how I never learned that 20 years.
Is that why someone would go up in needle size to try to make it wider, to shorten it? Because if you made something wider, it would shrink it. And sometimes people's color work is tight. So they go up in needle size to kind of balance that out. But I wonder if that
it was just one of those things that I didn't know, because I was working on something and I couldn't reconcile. And so I had sent something back to the publication, and then I started doing some research on it, and I'm like, oh, and then the reason that they gave for it. And I was just like, one of those things where I was like, okay, I learned something new this month, because I
feel like, though, that is the nature of the beast of knitting, is that we can never stop learning if we want, right? Like you can continue to step forward and step forward and step forward into new techniques, new understanding, new fit, new, and I hate saying to people, you just have to knit a few sweaters to get what you want. You have to knit a couple pairs of socks before you'll get the fit you want, because they're like, can I just knit the first pair and have them fit? Well, sometimes, but sometimes you just have to figure out your own method, your own gauge, your own like fit that you like, just because I say this works for me in this fit and this, it doesn't mean that it would work for everyone. So, but you did say in an interview that you like advanced beginners because they're eager.
Yeah, I always like to call them adventurous beginners. I like the beginners who are willing to learn things, are ready to learn something new. And I think that's part of the reason I've crocheted since I was a child. My stepmother taught me to crochet when I was very young, and I've had crocheted all my life. And then I learned to knit when we moved here. But I think part of the reason that I progressed so quickly in the knitting and was, designing within a few years was the fact of the matter was, well, first off, knitted objects aren't very practical in Florida. So I didn't need to knit 20 hats, but I would knit one hat and I would learn how to knit cables on that hat. And then I would knit a purse and it would have Farrell stranding in it. And so every time I did a project in the beginning, the project had to have something new in it. It had to have something that I'd never done in knitting before. And so it was very much, the adventurous thing. And that's like I said, my favorite knitter is an adventurous beginner, because first off, they don't know that they can't do it, which they can. And second off, they're just willing to try things, and they're, and a lot of when you have that spirit, it's like, oh, you're going to have to rip out. And yeah, you're going to have to rip out. I've been designing for 15 plus years. I've got 300 and some things under my belt, and I ripped out an entire shawl the other day. So it just,
the whole month of June, I ripped back yokes on a sweater because it just wasn't what I wanted. But absolutely, I agree. I think we're really similar in that way. I've been podcasting now for 5 years, and I don't know how many times I have said the only reason that I knit a new project is because it has something in it that intrigues me. Mm-hmm. Like and I think that's why the design piece also came around, is that I wanted to implement some things that I learned or something different, because I am all about bold and color, and that is not everyone's aesthetic, but I also don't see it a lot because somewhere in the world, knitwear designers and people were told, blue and purple are the colors that sell, and neutrals are great. And so there's just a lot of that out there. And sometimes you go into a yarn store and that's really what's featured as well, are a lot of neutrals, and not that they don't have the brights, but I'm just a screaming yellow zonker, right? Like I love all color in everything. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some of your favorite knits of all time, or some of your favorite designs, or I can put pictures in after the fact, or I can just put the titles down. But do you have some things that we can share, some ideas,
Well, I will say that Morganite, the one that you knit, is one of my favorites. If I redid it, I mean, as you become more experienced, there's things you would do differently. But part of the reason that is one of my favorite things is the photography that they did.
It was Pom Pom Quarterly, issue 6, August of 2013. So you were like early on in the Pom Pom, right?
And they used this model, this beautiful, beautiful woman whose name is, if I remember correctly, her name is Cleopatra. And I hope that's not wrong, but I went and followed her on Instagram because I was just obsessed. I'm like, you made my stuff look so beautiful. It was just like, she was so, and it's that rich orange. I think it's a Malabrigo color, and she's just glowing. And I'm like, yep, that's better than any photography I could ever do. And,
they're kind of known for their beautiful images.
And I felt the same way about my book. The first book that I did, I had a photographer from Interweave that just did beautiful things. But for me now, and I will tell you this, I picked the totally wrong career as a knit designer. I am the slowest knitter you will ever meet. Everything takes me forever. Oh yeah, I love that yoke. Actually, my mom has that sweater now because she still lives in Ohio, and fall leaf colors, like fall foliage, is like her favorite colors. And so that sweater lives with her. It's too small for me anyways, because she's tiny. But
just so everyone knows, it is DK weight, 20 stitches and 26 rows on size 7. The sizes go from 32 to 48. And the suggested yarn is Madelinetosh DK.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I thought that was
just so people know.
But yeah, but I'm a really slow knitter. And so actually my favorite projects are faster things. I've become completely obsessed, and they just keep coming out of me, is little cowls that have the triangle in the front. I just keep knitting.
You have a new one out, don't you?
I had a recent one that I put out, and that was the first time I used, I don't know how to say it. I'm horrible with accenty stuff.
I'll tell you. La Bien-Aimée. Merino DK, 20 stitches, 28 rows on a US 5. Now I'll put it back up.
That yarn is butter. That yarn it's just one of those yarns where it was like, yeah. So, but I love those little cowls. I don't wear them very often because Florida, we get, 5 sweater days a year if we're lucky. But yeah, but
I do think they're really wearable for everyone else, right? Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. I think they're very wearable. And it's one of those things, the majority of the ones that I do that are the cowls with the triangle, it's one skein of yarn, because everybody has those one precious skein that they picked up at, the Fiber Fest or the yarn store, and they don't know what to do with it. And so that's part of the other reason that I really love the little cowlettes.
Yeah. And that one came out in May. So it's new too.
New. And it's sad because I have piles of things that I haven't published yet, and I just don't get around to it because I'm busy with other things.
Because you're doing all these other things.
Yeah.
For people.
So, but yeah, it is. Well, and also when the boys were in high school, the girls clamored to model for me.
Oh.
And so I had like this endless supply of super adorable girls. Like all of my photography for my second book were girls that went to the boys' schools.
And what was the second book?
Second are top-down sweaters.
Let me look.
That one,
right here, top-down knit sweaters.
Yes.
And it's at the bottom of your.
Yeah, and that
16
one actually,
versatile styles featuring texture, lace, cables, and color work. Okay, so that's that one.
Yes.
I know I have a little glare. I'm trying to not have glare here.
No, you're fine. And that one actually was weird because it took a really, really long time for it to come out. The publishing company that I worked with, it went under, and then it got bought out, and then it got bought again, and it was like a whole thing. But so that one I ended up doing my own photography for, and I'm not nearly as good as the other people. But the girls would just, so now I don't have models anymore. My favorite model that I usually use, she's married now and she's, busy. And I mean, if I texted her right now, she would meet me at the park and we would take pictures. But
we have so much. The same thing happened to me. I had a gal, she modeled for me in my first book, Minnesota 52. And then now she's married and has her second child. Right. Yeah. She modeled, the baby modeled my Christina hat. And then now we have another child. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not calling her. Right. She's working, 2 babies.
Yeah.
Beautiful gal. I loved having her. Joanna, she's a face of a lot of my designs because I used her exclusively to kind of have that recognition. Right.
I think it helps. I think,
when you're starting, it certainly does. Right.
No. I used the same girl for quite a number of years. But yeah, I definitely need to like get with her. And there's so many things that I have that are like blocked. I have things that are photographed that still need to be released. And I
will say,
get around to it.
Because this just came in the mail and this has nothing to do with this, but Gail Zucker is having a collaborative photo shoot September 15th. You can send her all your stuff all in one go. And
I know some people that have done. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was looking at that because I have several things. I'm going to go back here. At the bottom of a designer's page is all the things that they have published in. That's impressive, Corrina. That's impressive. Look at all those.
Yeah.
Different books and things. So many. A Year of Stripes. Knitting Wizardry. Fun. Perfectly placed striped Yellowstone shawls. Did you do a design for? Yeah, you must have.
Well, that was the name of a yarn actually.
Okay.
It was called Yellowstone, and it was from Stitch Sprouts. And so I did a collection with all the colors that she had in the Yellowstone yarn. So
got it. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot to look at, you guys. A lot. Do you have some other design names that we could share?
One of my favorites, and I don't even remember when it was published, 2009, probably. I think it's pronounced Gaenor. I found it, I used to go with to baby name finders and stuff to find names, but it's Gaenor, and it's a sideways shawl, and you can use any yarn with it. And it's just one of those things that I'm super, super proud of. And that was the thing that I published that made me think that I could have a career doing knit design. And those are actually recent photographs. My initial photographs of that were not that cute. That's the girl that's married now that does modeling for me. But it's just one of those things where it was like, so many people bought that at the time. And that was at the time when you just had to drop something on Ravelry and everybody would buy it. And I'm just so proud of that. And
fingering weight, 1 skein, US size 7 needle.
Yep.
76 inches long and 24 deep. Just for people to
Yeah,
kind of
and
get
it's
an idea.
bigger.
They can go over and look at it.
But it's one of those things that because of the way that it's written, you just stop when half of your yarn is gone. And then you can, which I love that kind of a thing. I love the kind of a thing where you can play with that. Like you could do that in any yarn as long as you like the way the fabric drapes.
Yep.
So,
And then use up most of your skein.
exactly. You know what else I really love? I love the FanGirl hat. And I designed that. The boys were still in primary school, and I was designing presents for the teachers. And one of the teachers was a Florida Gators fan. So we used Florida Gators colors. And so, but it's one of those ones where I loved the idea that you could pick any colors that are like your two favorites.
Yep.
And yeah. And you could pick any colors that are your two favorites and make like a fandom hat.
Yeah.
My head.
No, that's great. Because like a lot of people do this time of year too, are starting to go to high school football games, high school soccer games, college football game. Let's talk briefly about your co-working hosting.
Yes.
Kind of newer.
It's kind of newer.
Newer business.
So I
know nothing really about co-working and what it is. I looked it up and I read your stuff on your website and I was like, oh, how does this work?
So basically my brain is mean and dumb and I get distracted very easily and I have trouble staying focused. And of course, when I'm doing tech editing, it helps because I have timers going and I can't float off like a butterfly and do something else. But one of the things that I found as I've been doing different things in my business that really helps me is the concept of body doubling, which I've always done, but I never knew what it was called. I remember when we had lived here and we were moving to our second home here, I called my friend and I said, can you come over and just sit in my living room while I pack the boxes? I don't need you to help pack the boxes. I know you've got a toddler. You can bring, the baby, and I just need someone in the room and so it's that concept that when there's someone else in the room, and of course with COVID and everything and, the way different things were, what I used to do all the time is I would go to Starbucks. And so just having people around helped me get work done, but also it's very expensive because, you buy coffee and lemon loaf and all the good things and you tip the kids. So I found virtual co-working, which is run over Zoom. And I got some of my friends to help me test it. And so I have set up a membership. So you can pay a monthly fee and I run about it's a minimum of 60 hours a month. Normally we do, 4 hours a day. We do a morning session and an afternoon session, depending on where you are. Like one of the ladies is in Norway and she only comes for the morning sessions. But we get together, we tell everybody what we're working on and we set timers. We do 25 minutes and then we check in again. And we do that over the course of the 2 hours. And it's one of those things where if you were in your phone and you were publishing your own reel and then you got lost in everybody else's reels, then the timer goes off and there's people looking at me and I'm like, okay, how are we doing? And so it's just a structured work day and it's done virtually. And initially it was only like knitting and yarn people because that's who I know. But we've started getting some people that do wedding stuff now. So but basically we just come in and it kind of gives me structure to my work day. My husband works at home as well. So I structured it around his work day. We work from 10 to noon and then I have a long lunch break so that if we want to go out, we can. And then we work from 2:30 to 4:30. And then at 4:30, I'm done and I pretend I know what I'm making for dinner. But most days I don't know what I'm making for dinner, but so it just is kind of a structure thing. So the combination of the timers and the body doubling helps me get things done. And a lot of people who are in our industry have those kinds of creative brains that want to go all the places and not stay on task. And so it's just a way to stay on task. And it's done wonders for me. And it definitely isn't for everybody. I remember one of my friends that I'm close with, I reached out to her and I'm like, hey, we're going to do this thing. Do you want to try it out with us? When we were just like trying to figure it out. She goes, oh my God, that would be the worst thing ever. I would hate that. And she wasn't saying it like to denigrate me or anything, but it was like, there are some people that it works for, and there are other people where it's like, No, I don't. And for me, it works. And so for the other people that have joined up, it works. And people kind of come and go as they need the time. And it's like a little mini community of people. And I'm hoping to grow it more. But right now, it just gives me a structure to get through things.
So it really doesn't matter what you're working on
No.
to you.
Mm-mm.
But if you go bigger, then how would everybody check in? Would you have another group going and another timer?
So right now, we haven't had like huge groups of people in the rooms at the
Right.
same time.
Right.
And on a day when everybody's staying on task, we can get through everybody checking in like a minute. And I allow 5 minutes for it. So I know that I can grow quite a bit before we need to stop checking in verbally. But the plan is to, when it's too big, we will either check in via chat or,
sure.
or
Yeah.
we will do breakout rooms. But right now it's a small enough group that we can almost always get through it in like the first 5 minutes. Right now we have one of our co-working friends has moved across the world. And so with her husband, and so she's getting her dogs on Saturday finally after weeks and weeks of all of the stuff. And so we did talk a lot about dogs today. But so that got us a little outside. But normally everybody's very much, I'm still working on content. I had to go and make coffee because I'm not awake yet. I had to, and sometimes, honestly, for me, a lot of times, especially midweek, I will clean my desk and I will be, okay, this 25 minutes, I am cleaning my desk and I'll take my camera down off of my thing and let them see, it's such a mess right now, but it is Friday, so I can clean it for the weekend. But
right.
But
yeah. I like, my husband works from home as well, but he works upstairs in a little office space, and I work on the main floor. And he comes down often during the day, and we'll have lunch, and he will come to the door and just stand there or interrupt because I'm not in meetings or I'm not on Zoom or whatever. I'm just working on patterns or whatever. In the 5 years, I guess it's been 4 years since he started working from home, I've ever gone upstairs twice ever because, someone came to the door for him or there was a phone call, right? Like an important, like I don't interrupt him. And I finally had to have that conversation, like, excuse me, but you're interrupting my workday. But because I'm a creative, it doesn't feel like I have a work day because I work until all hours of the night and then I sleep in sometimes in the morning because I'm such a night owl.
You are a night owl.
I said, you can't just come to the door because you're interrupting my flow, my work. But for him, the co-working thing is meetings right? Like for him, what you do is literally he's on Zoom having a meeting with 6 people, and then the next hour having a meeting with 6 people, which is really co-working, right? They're checking in, they're doing the work that needs to be done or having the talk, but that's how his day is, which is why I would never go up and walk in because there could be 30 people with the cameras. I come walking in my pajamas, right? Like but for him, he sees me as being just far more unstructured, unscheduled, whatever. And I could shut the door and put a sign on it and say, but there are times when it's perfectly fine for him to and I'm with the dog, and you have a new puppy.
We've had her now. Yeah, we've had her for a year and a half now, but she's doing better, but she's a lot. She is not my dog. She was supposed to be my dog, but she is my husband's dog. So, I take care of her some during the day, but he's actually moved his office downstairs, so he takes care of her. But we've had the same kind of problems. So I'm in what's technically considered our formal living room. We have a dining room. So, which we're not formal people at all, but whatever. So I hung up curtains, and
this is my dining room, Corrina.
Is it? So this is my office, but
it's where I podcast, but I don't have a formal dining room either. I mean, I have a hutch in it, so it's a dining room on the schematic.
No. But I put up curtains, and I also have a neon sign. If you look on, I think I have it on my Instagram somewhere, but I have a neon sign that says "On the Air," and so if you see the sign, if the curtains are closed and the sign is on, you're not supposed to like stand in the kitchen and ask me where the peanut butter is, you know, but it still happens. But so yeah, I have a neon sign and I have curtains and it's getting better, but we've had a lot of the same struggles because he's very much, he just he works for a company. He works for a big company. He has structured meetings and conference calls and a work day.
Yep.
Whereas, and that's part of the reason that I started the co-working was because I needed to have certain hours that I was actually working on things because it's easy for me. I'm an early person. You send me emails and I answer you 4 hours later because you send them at 2 and I answer you at 6.
I know.
But
it works for us.
It works. But I totally.
I'm up till I have to make myself go to bed. And my husband is up at 5:30 running. And I didn't start this life until COVID. I got up with everyone else and right. I did not function as well. I really learned that if I can sleep after 8:30 in the morning, my day functions so much better and I get a second wind. Last night I was like, you have to go to bed. I have an alarm on my phone that says literally go to bed because otherwise I can knit and take notes and knit and get on the computer till all hours and it's different for you. So, co-working, are you then telling yourself that you have to be home in your office for those 10 to 12 and 2 to 4:30 every day?
Pretty much. We take some time off here and there, but that's, and I guarantee like a minimum number of hours for the people that are paying members. But Monday through Thursday, I am at my desk on those hours every day. We do, Friday mornings, I do a free session where if you want to come and try it out, people can come and try it out. So like Friday mornings, I don't do it every Friday morning, but most Friday mornings I do the free session. And so, but yeah, because I can get up at 6 and do a million things, but not actually get any work done. And then it's lunchtime. Whereas if I get up at 6 and I walk on the treadmill and I do this and I go through all the things and I do all my morning routine things, no matter what, there's going to be alarms that are going to start going off that say, did you post in the Facebook group? Did you, it's 9:45. You need to be ready for co-working. Is your hair still in a towel? Which sometimes it is, but it just, it
wouldn't really matter, right? If you're working from home and you're okay with being on Zoom.
It doesn't bother me. I've gotten very used to seeing my face on Zoom and sitting with other people, and people will apologize for things. And I'm like, my hair's still wet, or I just had food fall out of my mouth onto my desk. You're fine.
So you run this through Craftstar Studio?
Yes.
Or is that?
No, yes. I mean, the Craftstar Studios is just the brand name for my patterns and my tech editing work. I've got the co-working set up under a different name because I'm trying to expand beyond yarn people. So it's actually called Acorn Co-working. And so it's, you're planting those little seeds and growing those big things, but you just got to do the little things one at a time. And that's
where someone would go. Because I do have some people that are designers or that are knitting people or that work from home that might be interested. So I want to make sure that people know where they can find you. So Craftstar Studio would be your website.
Mm-hmm.
And then Acorn Co-working would be.
If they go to CorrinaFerguson.com, that's where I keep all of the co-working.
Got it. Okay.
So CorrinaFerguson.com.
And then you mentioned Facebook. So do you run a business part on Facebook too, or no?
Well, I have 2 things on Facebook. We have a kind of a check-in thing that we keep going for the co-working people. What's your goal for the week? What are you working on for the week? That kind of thing. But I also am trying to have a group, and it's a small group. I think there's only like 40 people in it, but it's creative business owners. And so those are people that, when you have a creative business, it's different than other. It's just different. There's all kinds of online businesses and different things, but having a business that's in the craft world or the creative world is just different. There's different rules. There's different, there's different things. And so I've got this creative business growth group, and like people will come in and be like, have a question about do I need a contract for this? And trying to encourage those conversations. So that's one of the things that I do in the Facebook, and that's just a free group. But it basically just having people to bounce off that kind of know where you're coming from. Because, I've got a bunch of business groups that I'm in, and if I come in and I'm talking about yarn, I actually had somebody just this week. I'm working on a tech editing course to teach people to be tech editors. And I'm in a business group to get this course together. And a guy comes in and he goes, you can't call it tech editors because people will think it's something else. You need to call it pattern editors. And I'm like, thanks. But if I call it pattern editors, the people in my industry will think I'm talking about something else. We call it tech editors. Knitting is technical writing. I understand that there are tech editors for nuclear warheads and this and that and this and that, but this is what we call it in our industry. Have a nice day. It was just, it was like really, really irked me because I was like, oh.
He felt the need to mansplain.
He felt the need to correct me. And I kind of understand it, but it's also somebody in the yarn industry. If I tell them that I'm a tech editor, they know exactly what I do. Yep. They might not know if I do it in knitting or crochet, because I don't really do it for crochet very much because I'm not as versed in those patterns, but they will know what that is. If I call myself a pattern editor, they're not going to know what I'm talking about. And so it was just interesting because it was just that kind of reconfirmation that people outside of the craft world and outside of the yarn world, they don't understand the phrases and the terminology and the challenges and the sometimes very, I baked you a pie to pay you for this kind of mentality that we're coming from. That's not a good way to say that.
No, but
you know what I'm talking about.
A $7 knitting pattern.
Right. It's just, it's different. And so people outside of the industry don't understand. So I'm trying to build a community where it's the people that get it. And, and so I post in there, a few times a week and encourage people. And we're getting a little bit of traction, but it's one of those things I couldn't find what I wanted. So I'm trying to build it. So it's the same with the co-working. I looked at some other co-working options because there are other co-working memberships out there. There's quite a few. And the majority of them are very, very tech bro. They're very dude, and it just was not my vibe. And I'm like, I want to work with people who, if I say that I'm knitting, they're not going to be like, you're what? Because I'm working, I'm knitting, and it's, so that's a whole, I could rant on that stuff for a whole year. So I should shush.
No, I think, we are having a little bit more of a business talk today, but I think that it's interesting to people who haven't ever been in this industry. It needs to become more value based, for that there is definitely a value of a good knitting pattern. There's a value in a good tech editor. There's, that's what people want to purchase. And then they get frustrated when they buy a free pattern on Ravelry and it doesn't work out for them. Right.
Yeah.
And then you say, well, I don't know that you should have taken a free pattern for that because it's probably not tech edited. Probably hasn't been test knit, and but then they complain that you want to put your pattern up to $8 or $9, and you're like, but it's costing me several $100s to get there. And I have harped on this, so my people have definitely heard it, but
there's
I do think that they have found a little bit of a boost in the sewing industry, where patterns are now much more. And you're getting, but you're getting this physical piece that you're printing out on, I don't even know, because I'm not a sewer, but they're printing out these big, and they're cutting and and doing all that. But it's similar to those old ones that we used to get in the little packets, but they're willing to pay more for the better quality of the pattern. And I think that that's where we need to go to with just honoring people's hard work.
It's the same for cross stitch. Cross stitch patterns are so much more expensive than knitting patterns.
Okay.
And it's fascinating to me that, you talk about, because I'm at a $7 price point and I'm working on moving things to $8, and I need to get things so that they're available other than Ravelry, not just on Ravelry, because that's not the end all be all that it used to be.
Yeah.
And so going from $7 to $8, I'm feeling resistance in myself because it's like, oh, is it? And then you're like, but I spent this many hours knitting it and this many hours doing this and this, and I spent.
But how many years have you been selling them for $7?
Not that many. I guess
A few.
it's been a while. It's
It's
definitely been a while. But
since COVID, everything's gone up, right? Like I'm
right?
like my pattern.
Well, and it's like the cross stitch though. Cross stitch are like, I want to say the last cross stitch pattern I bought was 18.
Oh, wow.
And there's no sizing involved. It's literally a chart that tells you where to put the different colors. And I'm not devaluing their work because I couldn't design the stuff. It's beautiful and I want to stitch it and all of that. But I think that knitting needs to come to that point where things are more valued. And it's fascinating to me the different attitudes around all of it. So
yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. Talk just briefly about what goes in for you to tech editing a pattern. What is just a little bit of the process? I've never had a tech editor on. I think people kind of know, but I also have some people who are newer knitters that wouldn't know what a tech editor does or how, briefly what the process might look like.
So for me, I think my process is very similar to a lot of people's. One of the things that I do, the first thing that I do when I get a tech edit is I print it. And I would like to say that I love you that you have page numbers on your patterns because a lot of designers don't put page numbers. And the first thing I have to do is go put page numbers because it's going to be all over my desk. But I print it and then I set up a spreadsheet and I'm going through and I'm checking everything. You're telling me that you're using this yarn. Does that yarn exist in that color? Does it, blah, 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 blah. Is that the correct yardage? Is that, is that the right thing? And I'm going through and like, anytime you have links in your pattern, I click through every single link to make sure that all of the links work. I go through and I check all of the math to make sure that all of the...
A big one for me is my inches and centimeters. Now I do more of a template, but there's a lot of times where Corrina has to go in and put in all my centimeters or my millimeters because I have forgotten.
No, but it helps to have it for different audiences. But I definitely think
it's mandatory. Like you need to have it.
It is. But I go through and I check all of the math. And then when it comes to more complex things, like for a hat, we had one hat recently where I was like, ooh, we got too short on this hat. And you're like, oh yeah, the test knitter is too short on the hat. And we made the hat longer and it was fine. But when it comes to sweaters and stuff, are the arms that fit this bust size going to fit a human? Is this going to be, wearable? Is it going to make the object as the object is pictured? And so it's just going through all those things step by step. I like to do it printed because what I do is I'm doing the spreadsheet and I'm checking things on the printed pattern and I mark up the pattern. And then when I go back to your electronic pattern and put all the changes in, then I'm double checking myself. And not saying I don't do snafus because we know I do, but it's a helpful double check. But it's really just going through everything, making sure that everything that's said in it is correct, making sure it makes the thing that you say it's going to make, making sure that the yarn amounts are correct. A lot of people are not very good at estimating yardages, for example, for sweaters. And it's difficult because it used to be like the Morganite sweater only goes to like a 48-inch bust because that's what we used to do. Now we're going to 72-inch busts sometimes.
Right.
Things. And I think it's great. I'm a plus size woman. We want to have a wide range of sizes. But it also brings challenges. Is there enough yarn for this size? And so it's going through and doing all of those things. And so much of it is spreadsheet based. And it always, when you guys do it on paper, I'm like, I can't even wrap my head around being able to do it. I mean, I could, but.
No, it's way slow. I mean, it's very slow. I think the more we put in the pattern, the more complicated those notes and editing becomes, which also then makes it easier to have issues, right? Like when you have a 12 size pattern, that is chock full. Back in the day, we were not doing that many, right?
Like 5.
And so people look at your pattern, I think, and they're like, well, I only need one size. And I'm not going to do 12 patterns. Like, I'm not going to make 12 patterns. I just like that. The ownership of that would be, so the investment is they're all in one. And then you get right now I'm getting this is a little hard to follow, Cori, because there are so many sizes that I'm struggling where to go next for my size. And I get that, right? Because there's so many sizes in our new patterns when they're wanting us to go up to 60 and now 70-inch bust lines, which back in the day, we were going maybe to 50, and there were much fewer sizes, and we weren't always going down to a 32. And so, I think in some respects, the Tin Can Knits gals who do baby to adult male 6XL screwed us all. Right? Like, I love I love that they did it and that every pattern has all those sizes. But it's difficult. It's a lot to manhandle into, and now the patterns are getting longer and longer. So you're hearing that too, right? You're like, oh my gosh, it's 12 pages. And I'm like, well, and that's why I think these companies, Knittrino and Tin Can Knits, are doing apps. And I think that's the wave of the future, is where you go in and you put in the size you need and it takes out all the extraneous stuff. And so you can use the app to just do your size. I can't develop an app for that. I'm going to have to download and I think that that's where Ravelry should head, is if they wanted to make that jump for people, is to develop an app where you'd buy the pattern, it would download into the Ravelry app, and it would take out, and you would just have in the pattern the size that, that like these two other companies are now doing, but that it took them years with an app developer.
I need to look into those, because that's interesting to me.
I just knit one out of the Tin Can Knits app, and all you have to do is put in, if you're making the long sleeved, long body crew V-neck, and then size 44, and the whole pattern comes up for just the numbers for the 44.
Interesting. That's awesome.
Each, and Knittrino is doing some of that, and I think that maybe what was the first app that came out? They have a couple of my patterns.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. They have some of mine too.
People will know what I'm talking about. I don't know, like, you can highlight where you're at in the pattern. I think that's kind of where we're headed with these patterns that are going to be significantly bigger material, to print, and we're getting away from printing stuff or whatever. And you could just narrow it right down to that. We've been working together, for a couple of years now?
I think it's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
It's been a good long
hundreds of hours.
It's been a lot. You have been a very loyal customer, ma'am.
Sometimes I am very needy.
You
and I write her these long, like, hey, I haven't been feeling well lately, and the dog just and I'm having this thing with the pattern, and then she gets back and she's like, I'm sorry you're going through all this, because I'm just a verbal, like,
you are fine. I'm
who I am. Like, I'm 63. I have hour-long podcasts every 2 weeks, and I edit a lot, and people know. Like, if people don't love me because I talk too much, they're not here.
Right? You're going to find your people.
I'm an ultra extrovert, and I've always been this way. I am, it's how I communicate with the world, is just through lots and lots of words. And so, but I really appreciate the relationship that we have built, even though we're not face to face a lot. I know that when I send you an email, I'm going to get a response. That has not always been the case. I know that when you tech edit my pattern, that it's going to hit all the high points. That has not always been the case, right? I feel more confident that my patterns are going out into the world well edited and test knit now, and that takes some of the stress away. So I want to thank you for that. I think I thank you often. I think I
do. I feel appreciated. I love working with you. So
it's me again.
No. It makes a difference. First off, you are always appreciative. You send me things that I ask for. Like if I say I need this, you send me what I need. And also the fact that we can go back and forth and we can figure out what's best for you and best for your patterns, but that, that you're willing to make adjustments and stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I kind of feel like in my head, there's this little voice that says, Corrina says.
Okay, I like that though. That makes me happy.
No, for sure. Like Corrina would say, get this done, right? Or whatever. So, okay,
Yeah.
we don't have to keep going here. I don't want to take any more of your time. I think we're getting close to at our time slot here.
I love this.
But yeah, okay, everybody go over and look at Ravelry. Look at all of Corrina's patterns. I will have a podcast, Patreon podcast that I do at the front of this for my Patreon people. And then this part goes up on for everyone on YouTube, for all my subscribers, and they can go and look at your website. They can look at all your designs, buy some of our patterns, because we all need people to collect as many patterns as you do yarn.
There you go.
That's the key for we designers, is that we need you to have as many patterns in your queue as you have yarn.
That's a good way to think about it.
That would help us. Our patterns are cheaper than your skeins of yarn.
This is true. This is very true.
No, I'm really thankful that you were here today. It was good to see you again and chat. Right now we're working on a couple of different design things that are coming out shortly. The Chevy hat pattern, which I've talked about before, with the chevrons and the little dog tag, that is finishing up with testers. And the Striped Dream sweater has another month of testing. But a couple people have finished. It's turning out darling. I have completely finished mine. I'm just gonna go like this. I just steamed it this morning. So I finished my short sleeved one, and I had to stop on the long sleeved one because I have to try it on to see how long I want my sleeves to be, because I want to be able to wear it at Rhinebeck. You're not going, are you? Are you going to Rhinebeck?
I don't have plans to go to Rhinebeck at this point. I was actually talking to some friends of mine because some of the newer people in co-working actually live in that area. And I was like, oh, if we went to Rhinebeck, and it's a little late to be looking for a house at this point. But
well, we didn't get ours until a month or so ago, and there were still a number available. So you could.
Well, I may take a look at it.
It's hard to do it last minute though.
It is hard to do it last minute. I may take a look. Well, the nice thing is the flights from here to New York are usually pretty cheap. But I may. But if I don't do it this year, I'm definitely planning on next year, because it's been a few years since I've been up and I really enjoy that. So, but yeah. So you're going to wear it at Rhinebeck? That's awesome.
Yes, I'm going to wear it on Friday, because on Saturday, you probably don't know this, but the Madison, Wisconsin Knitters Guild is taking a bus to Rhinebeck.
Oh, neat.
And they have 50 some people going on this bus, I think. And they chose my Pretty Boxes sweater to knit as a group. And they're all going to wear it at Rhinebeck. And I am going to be able to get a picture of my sweater from last year, the Pretty Boxes, with this giant group of people who chose to knit my pattern.
Cori, that's amazing.
I mean, there are going to be like 40 or more Pretty Boxes sweaters walking around at Rhinebeck this year.
That's fabulous.
I know. I've never had that. Like I was like,
wonderful.
Woo! Okay. I will say goodbye to everyone. Thanks so much, Corrina. This was lovely.
You're welcome. This was great.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
person there.